welcome back to the Chargers Check-In. My name is Cecilia, and it is Chiefs Week. Obviously a really big game for the Chargers and a huge game for the Chiefs. The Chiefs' playoff push has essentially already begun, and the Chargers are looking to up their chances. If the Chargers win, their playoff odds go from about 75 to about 95. Big week for them. Obviously for the Chiefs, if they lose, there is a chance that they are eliminated from playoff contention this weekend, depending on what happens in some other games. So this is an important game for both teams. The Chiefs are essentially backed into a corner, and they're going to play like they are. And, for them, the playoffs have essentially already begun, and that is when they're at their best. So let's take a look at the injury report, and then we will get into the state of the Chiefs coming into this game. So on the Chargers side, Darius Davis didn't practice. He was seen walking around the facility in a walking boot. So he's going to be out, and that could potentially be a longer term thing. He might be out for the rest of the season. I would expect Kamani Vidal and Hassan Haskins to be the next people in line for kickoff returns. For punt returns, we have seen Tarheeb Still take that role. We've seen Ladd take that role. Not sure what direction they will go with. I'm curious about that. Will Dissly didn't practice Wednesday, but he did practice in full on Thursday, so I do expect him to be available, and that's a pretty big deal with Tucker Fisk on IR. Will Dissly is the next person up in terms of a blocking tight end option. Troy Dye didn't practice with a hip injury. He is usually their passing down linebacker. He rotates in with Denzel Perryman, who is in on those rushing downs, and this is a pretty big deal also because Troy Dye, he plays special teams, and that's now 2 hits to special teams, right, with Darius Davis and Troy Dye. So that's definitely something to look out for. Hopefully he can play, also because they already struggle in coverage over the middle of the field, and Denzel Perryman is not out there to be in coverage. So it'll be interesting to see what their rotation looks like if Troy Dye cannot play. Elijah Molden was out. I hope he can play, but I wouldn't be shocked if he couldn't. The hamstring issue has kind of been around for quite a long time. He looked like he was in a lot of pain over the weekend when they took him out, and he didn't go back in the game. So it's unfortunate. Luckily, the rest of that position room is playing pretty well, so I'm confident they can make some good adjustments there. Ladd was limited with a foot injury, but he did practice, so I do expect him to play. Trey Pipkins is still out with the ankle injury. I would be very surprised if he played. After seeing him get helped off the field last game, that didn't look good. And then, of course, the one you're all thinking about, Justin Herbert, was limited, probably will be for all 3 practices. Just how it is, it did look like he was able to wear kind of a smaller brace situation, which is obviously a good thing. He did mention he got more imaging done, stuff was looking a little bit better, and he feels like his grip strength is a little bit better this week. And, after last week's fumble, because he couldn't really use 2 hands in that situation, that's pretty good news. And, it's promising for him to be able to go under center this week. And that's a pretty big deal. That really opens up the playbook, and the playbook better be a lot more open this week, which we will get into. But obviously we got to talk about the Chiefs. The Chiefs have had a lot of injuries on their offensive line. Trey Smith should be back. He did go from a full practice to a limited practice. If he's back, the offensive line gets a bit of a boost. Trent McDuffie, I expect him to be out there. He left last game. He didn't return, but he was running around on the sideline, and he was moving pretty well. He was limited at practice. I think he will be in there, but I think that they will rotate Noel Williams. He's their rookie corner, in there a little bit more often than normal. He's already been getting a fair amount of snaps, for a rookie, but I do expect him to take a bigger role. Nico Remigio should be back. He's their kick returner. He missed last week, and, obviously that could end up being a big deal just because the Chargers have been struggling to stop good kick returners. Josh Simmons has been out. He's on IR. He had a surgery, I believe, on his wrist. He's not going to be back for a while. So those are the injuries, right? You have 2 teams with a lot of injuries on the offensive line. Neither team has their starting left tackle, and so it's going to be a very different look than it was when the Chargers played the Chiefs in Brazil, over the course of the season. A lot of changes have happened, right? The Chiefs have shuffled around their offensive line. They now have Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice. That's a big deal. The Chargers now have Odafe Owe. They now have Amarian Hampton back from IR. They had Hampton last time, but he was kind of forced to play the number 1 role with Najee Harris kind of being on a snap count at that point. Believe it or not, there was a time in the year when you had Amarian Hampton and Najee Harris, and now it's going to be Amarian Hampton and Kamani Vidal, which is a bit of a different look. So it's a different feel to this game, and we're going to take a look at the state of the Chiefs because things are not looking the way that they looked in previous years. This is a very unusual thing, and I think the Chiefs are kind of shocked as to where they are at this point of the season. Now, In 2024, the Chiefs won 10 games by less than a touchdown, and close games are just not going the same for them this year. The defense doesn't quite look the same. The offense has had some injuries. I think Mahomes didn't start out the season very well, like playing at the high level you would expect from him, and I think that might have been the difference in a couple of those games. But make no mistake, he's playing well now. So that will reflect in their record, but it won't reflect in how they're playing right now. A lot changes week to week, and it has been quite a few weeks since the Chiefs last saw the Chargers. So their kicker is not having a good year. Harrison Buckner, he's missed quite a few kicks, and couldn't happen to a more deserving person. They're averaging 7.2 penalties per game and 62 penalty yards per game. For context, the Chargers, who I am often talking about how many penalties they get on the offensive line, are averaging about 50 penalty yards per game, so bit of a difference there. The Chargers did get 7 penalties last week, so hopefully that's something they can clean up, especially on the offensive line. But the real thing with the Chiefs is that they're on the bubble of getting into the playoffs. There is a path for them to do it. It doesn't depend entirely on them. Obviously, they've been eliminated from division contention, and they need to win out, and they know it. Right. There is a possibility, like I said, that they get eliminated this weekend, and that's kind of in their hands, right? Because if they can beat the Chargers, they're still in it. They're going to be playing with their backs against the wall, and that means they're going to be playing playoff Chiefs football. I guess it's possible that they have regressed to the point where they aren't, but I am not going to put it past Andy Reid and Mahomes and, all of the great players that they have, because they have a pretty stacked roster, to play their best when their best is needed. And so I think this is going to be a really tough game. The Chiefs are favored, and I know it feels like, but the Chargers are 9-4. The manner in which the Chargers have won has depended a lot on the mistakes of other teams. The Chiefs have made a lot of mistakes this year. If they don't make a lot of mistakes, the Chargers are going to have to elevate their play and test their ceiling rather than their floor, right? And that is going to be a tough thing for the Chargers to do. So let's get into how the Chargers should handle the Chiefs' defense. Because with Steve Spagnuolo, they have been one of the better defenses in the NFL for quite a few years. Their defense doesn't quite look the same this year. The coverage has not been good. Everyone on that defense has a pretty terrible passer rating allowed. They have a team forced incompletion rate of around 8%, which is bottom 10 in the NFL. That's a big regression. Chris Jones has been an incredible player, but he has regressed a bit this year. He's 31, not as consistent. But don't think that means he's not a threat to this interior. And they've been lining him up on the edge. They've been doing what they can in recent weeks to get him a little bit farther along, and it has largely worked. He has played a little bit better. I think with Chris Jones, there are times when his judgment eludes him, but physically, he still has the advantage on, I would say, everyone on this offensive line. So that's definitely something to look out for. Karlaftis, still a threat. This defensive line is still going to be a problem for the Chargers offensive line. Make no mistake about that. He absolutely tore up the Texans offensive line, which I think is in kind of a similar place to the Chargers, but they're still great at getting pressures, right? Even though the line has regressed, Steve Spagnuolo has been blitzing at a much higher clip than normal. I don't expect them to back off of that this week at all after seeing the state that Justin Herbert is in. They're averaging 1.8 sacks per game, which is 28th in the league, but they're still getting a lot of hits on the quarterback. They're not necessarily closing it out with sacks. They're still getting a lot of hits, so it's still just as much of a threat to Justin Herbert. This was an important part of their defense last year, and it hasn't quite been the same. They don't allow many points per game on average, but there's not a real strength to their defense other than probably Chris Jones, right? That's not to say Trent McDuffie isn't great. He's just been a little banged up. I will say the defense tends to play at their best in the fourth quarter, like you would expect with a team like the Chiefs. They allow the 5th fewest points in the NFL in the fourth quarter. In the red zone, especially, they become a lot more effective. That's how they can keep games close, despite a discrepancy in yardage. They win the field position game, which doesn't always look like getting more yards on offense and allowing fewer on defense. That's that special teams factor that I talked about that the Chargers absolutely need to worry about. And in terms of how the Chargers can handle them from the Chargers offense perspective, they need a protection plan that looks entirely different from last week. Obviously, you can look at my reaction to last week's game, and in the second half of that video, I go into everything that went wrong with their protection plan, because just about everything that could have did. They're going to need quick passes, frequent runs, creative runs, much better route concepts. I think a lot of people are just tearing into Greg Roman's route concepts because you often get a lot of receivers in the same area of the field, and it makes it very obvious where the best option to throw is. It makes it very clear for these guys who they can just play zone. They don't have to abandon one receiver for another. Even if like Greg Roman said in his press conference, one of those receivers is then going to be a blocker. That doesn't really matter if you can't get the ball to them. So you definitely want to see something better there. I'm not super confident that they're going to change that since Greg Roman was defending his route concepts. But the Chiefs secondary is nowhere near as good as the Eagles. The Eagles have one of the best. So if they adjust the passing game, it could look significantly better. That's something that they absolutely can change in a single week. With quick passes, you need players who can get yards after the catch. And for that, I would be looking to Trey Harris over everyone else. I think it is time to treat him like a wide receiver too. I really do. Even if there isn't a clear wide receiver one, I think Trey Harris should be the clear wide receiver two at this point. He has just been more reliable than QJ, more reliable than Ladd in recent games, and I don't think teams are giving him the same attention. I don't think he's dealing with double coverage necessarily like Ladd has been. He's not dealing with the same level of press. I think it's time to look to him to be the player that they drafted him to be. You know, he was taken in the second round for a reason. Let's allow him to step up. He's earned it. Obviously, everyone wants him to get passes just because he's such a good blocker, right? He deserves it. But I also think he deserves it for his yards after the catch potential. It seems like every time the ball is in his hands, good things are happening. So I would love to see that. In the run game, I want to see more pin and pulls. I think the blocking on the left side is good enough for that. If they're going to do screens, I think they need to do it to the right side because they've become so reliant on running to the left that you've started to see linebackers kind of shade that direction ahead of the play, which is a problem. You know, obviously it's a problem when in the passing game you only throw to one guy, right? We kind of saw that last year with Ladd. The run game is kind of turning into the same thing because obviously they trust Jamari Sawyer more than they do anyone on the right side. And that makes sense. And you also have Zion on that side. I get it. It's becoming a little predictable. And I think that factored into why the running backs had a hard time last week. And I don't think they can afford that. I think this is a game that you have to have a successful run game in, and they're going to need to do some sort of changeup to get the ball going to the right side. And last week, that changeup came in the form of Justin Herbert deciding on his own, no, I'm not going to hand the ball off. I'm going to turn around and just run it myself. And it worked. It worked twice. And that was great. Obviously, that's not something you really want to do this week, right? I do think they should give Justin Herbert a designed run early. I think that would be a really good thing, even if it isn't effective, just because if you can keep the defense thinking about, well, there's always the threat of Justin Herbert running, you know, then you can keep them a little bit off of where they want to be in coverage. They're going to be afraid to commit to coverage without a QB spy, and I think that is a really good thing for getting the ball into the pass catcher's hands, which is something they struggled at last week. That doesn't mean you ever have to have Herbert run later. You know, obviously he's really hurt and you don't want to see that, but if you can just have some sort of designed run, even if it only goes for 4 yards, I think that's totally fine. And above all in the run game, get the ball to Amari Hampton. I talked about it in my last video, but Kamani Vidal is really good. You definitely want him involved. Hampton is better. Hampton's different. You know, he has a second gear that I don't think Kamani Vidal has, and it's easy to forget that because our expectations for Kamani were pretty low. It was just like, hey, if you can just go out there and be a serviceable back, that would be great. It was a later draft pick. 3 guys got hurt ahead of him, but, you know, he's blown those expectations out of the water, but Amari Hampton is still Amari Hampton. And while he might be on a snap count this week, I don't think it will be as tight as it was last week. So I expect a bigger role for Amari Hampton. And, you know, I think there are a lot of adjustments that the Chargers can make really easily. And, you know, you could debate, are the A-gap pressures, is it Herbert calling the wrong coverage? Is it the running backs not picking up on stuff quick enough? Is it Bradley Boseman not even looking at the guy in front of him? That certainly is what I think that it is. But things can absolutely change in a single week because all of these problems are relatively solvable, and I expect them to show up a lot better than they did last time because the Chiefs are going to blitz. They're going to send guys at Herbert. They know that if they can take Herbert out of the game, like I said, Herbert is the win condition, right? And they know that. And I absolutely expect the Chiefs, who haven't missed the postseason in quite some time, who do not have players who are used to losing, I absolutely expect them to take every opportunity to hit Herbert's hand, whether it is a part of the game or not. I do not expect a clean game coming from the Chiefs, unfortunately. Now let's take a look at the Chiefs offense and how the Chargers defense and Jesse Minter can approach handling them. In terms of their receivers, you have Tyquan Thornton, Xavier Worthy. Those are the biggest red zone threats that need to be covered. Worthy holds the fastest 40 time in NFL Combine history, 4.21. I'm sure you guys remember seeing that and seeing, this is the next guy in line after they lost their fast guy they had before. So Worthy struggles at times against press coverage, but if he gets separation, he is so dangerous after the catch. Travis Kelce has become the most common target, even if he isn't the most common red zone target. It's not that Travis Kelce hasn't regressed in his age, it's just that his chemistry is such with Mahomes that it kind of doesn't matter. A little bit like Keenan Allen's not as fast as he was, but he's always right where Herbert needs him to be. You can definitely expect him to get a lot of targets. Historically, the Chargers just put Derwin James on him, and it's very effective. I am concerned about the Chargers being pretty weak over the middle at the second level where Travis Kelce often shines. Obviously, he had that dropped pass last week that led to the interception that kind of locked the Chiefs out of that game. But I expect him to be right back at it and ready to play hard because this is it, right? And in Kansas City, there's a lot of talk about, is Travis Kelce going to retire and everything? Well, I think it depends on this playoff push, right? And we don't know. We can't possibly know that. You got to believe that if this is his last chance to make the playoffs, he's going to be on it. I don't think we can depend on the Chiefs, like I said, making the same execution errors that they have in recent weeks when they are now essentially in the playoffs. Other than that, obviously, Rashee Rice, his stats aren't going to be very impressive because he didn't play every game. He was suspended to start the year, as you guys will remember, but he's a great route runner. He reliably gets yards after the catch. Look for him on shallow crossers, on 2nd and long, 3rd and long. He's kind of their guy for that. But the biggest threat in the passing game is just Mahomes' ability to extend plays and get guys time, and that's something that we talk about it every week. The defensive line needs to get pressure, not just from the edges, but also from the interior to close up those rushing lanes. I think this is a week it's going to be especially hard to do that. Mahomes has that similar Justin Herbert quality of just because you make contact with him doesn't mean he's going down. He can escape a lot of sacks, and if he has a lot of time, he can throw people open, and it's going to be hard to cover receivers against him, not because of the receivers, but because of Mahomes, so I think this is a big opportunity for the defensive line to close up those opportunities to run. Last time they played, Jesse Miller used Deion Henley as a QB spy. Henley looked great in that role. Obviously, he hasn't had the best year, but he did have a really good game last week. He seemed to be moving fast and playing confident, so maybe they use that again. I think it's, like I said, it's an important game for the interior to crush the pocket. I think going against the banged up Chiefs offensive line is a good opportunity for that. Jawan Taylor, Trey Smith, they've both been banged up, so I am curious if this could end up being a big defensive line game, maybe if Teair Tart can get in there. On the defensive line, I should have mentioned this at the top, Naquan Jones got claimed off of waivers by the Texans, so Chargers will be playing against him soon. It's not a huge deal, but I don't love it. Naquan Jones has been somewhat important in the run game because Deshaun Hand has had injuries, and obviously the Chargers had a lot of guys coming off of IR at once. They had to make tough decisions. They were going to cut someone who was getting playing time. That was inevitable. It's just unfortunate for the defensive line, and it's a good opportunity for Jamari Caldwell to step up, and I like seeing how big of an impact these rookies are having. So hopefully the defensive line is able to get something going. The Chiefs' run game is struggling a lot this year. Isaiah Pacheco he's decent on a down-to-down basis, 4.3 yards per carry. But the explosive plays are what's missing there. His longest run of this year has been 16 yards, I believe, and it's just not looking good. They don't have that explosive run game threat, and when they do, it usually it's Mahomes. He, for a big portion of the season, was their lead rusher in terms of yards. Kareem Hunt, he does have 4 yards per carry, but both running backs are averaging fewer than 50 yards a game. So they don't have a clear running back one who is going to, reliably make something happen. But the Chargers have struggled a bit against the run game this year overall. Big defensive line game. They have an opportunity to shut down the run up the middle. That's something they've been pretty good at. It felt like there were times last week where Saquon was just running into a brick wall. So if they can pull that out again, that would be huge. Force them to run to the outside where it's a little bit riskier. You might get some tackles for losses. They have improved against the run over the course of the season. So hopefully when Bud Dupree is in, he is really good for those run stops. I think after his sacks, he really wanted to get after the passer, and so he's struggled a bit to set the edge in the last couple weeks. I think he's been targeted a bit in the run game, which isn't good. Now, the Chiefs have a backup left tackle, like I said, so it's possible they don't want to run in that direction. But the defense is a big opportunity to give the Chargers an advantage. We saw how the defense kept them in it last week. The offense could not get anywhere near as much done as we needed them to. If the defense can come out and play really strong, I think the Chargers offense will be able to play the kind of game that they want, and they'll be able to run the ball, win the time of possession game, not have to force points on every drive, and instead get good field position. Hopefully their special teams can back that up by getting some solid returns, and I'm curious what that will look like without Darius Davis. Darius Davis hasn't been having a good year by any means, but it's not like they have a clear next best option, so I'm curious how they handle that. Generally, the approach to this game is when you get into the red zone, you really need to convert. Like I said, you don't have to score on every drive. This isn't, the highest scoring team. It's not like when you play the Cowboys where it's like, well, you really have to be able to keep pace with them. But when you get in the red zone, you have to score touchdowns because their defense is really good at preventing touchdowns. And if you take that strength away, their defense stops looking really good. This is a team I think it's especially important to get an early lead on. They are a big live to fight another down team. They're a big field position team. Their kickoff coverage is good. And that's how they manage to win games without it ever feeling like they have the momentum, without it feeling like they're the ones who are playing really well. Mahomes always has check down options, something I hope Justin Herbert has this week. He constantly throws the ball away to avoid sacks. He doesn't like to throw to receivers who are covered really well. And so that can give the Chargers advantages on early downs. That can give them some second and longs. And they're pretty good in third down situations. But if the Chargers can get some sacks, get some pressure, get some good plays happening on second downs, that will put them in their best position to succeed, because the Chargers, like I've talked about, are the best defense in the league on third downs. But with Xavier Worthy, with Rashee Rice, the Chiefs are always a couple big passing plays away from being right back in it. So, like I said, a lot at stake this game. If the Chargers win, they are almost guaranteed to be in the playoffs, and that would be a huge deal given who they are playing in the next few weeks. It is going to be a really tough stretch. This is it. This is the gauntlet. So this is a huge game. I'm really excited that Justin Herbert is feeling a little bit better. I'm excited at how well the defense is playing. I think the offense has a great opportunity to make some necessary adjustments, and I'm really excited for this game. This is the best I've felt about, going against a Chiefs team in years, and that's not to say that it's any kind of guarantee that they win. It's not, like I said, the Chiefs are going to be playing like it's a playoff game. It's going to be tough, but the Chargers have a real chance to show us who they are this week. They could get to 10 wins this week, which would be absolutely awesome. If you told me that some of their best players on offense would be gone all year and they still managed to get to double-digit wins, I would be really happy with that. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe if you've liked what you've seen. You can join memberships if you want early access to draft content, if you want my game day notes, and if you want some input on my midweek videos, as well as what kind of prospects I'm looking at in the draft, because it is almost draft season. It's almost college playoff time, and I'm very excited for all that. But like I said, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you guys. This has been the Chargers Check-In. I'll see you guys next time.